Look, I just wanted to fish in peace. That's literally all this was about. A little peace and quiet at the end of a long week, with my line in the still, glassy water of the community lake. I didn't own a lakefront property. My house was on a regular lot, 3 streets back. But the HOA rules, which I'd skimmed once and immediately regretted, stated that the lake was common property for the enjoyment of all residents. So there I was, enjoying. Enter Karen. Not a Karen. The Karen, Brenda Carmichael, president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. She didn't walk around the lake path so much as she patrolled it. I saw her coming from 100 yards away, a vision in athleisure wear and simmering indignation. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sugary yet sharp, like a lemon drop laced with glass. "This lake is for residents of the lakefront blocks only, the premium blocks." I reeled in my line slowly. The HOA bylaws, Section 4C, say it's for all residents. Her smile tightened. Those are the old bylaws. We amended them at the last quarterly meeting. You would know that if you attended. She said attended, like it was a holy sacrament. I wasn't notified of any amendment, I said, keeping my tone mild. This was my unwind time, not my argue time. Not my problem. Notifications are sent to property owner of record. Maybe your landlord didn't forward it. She said landlord with a faint sneer, already categorizing me as a mere renter, transient, unimportant. I own my house, I said. Then you should check your mail. The rule stands. This lake is for Block A and B only. You're from where? D Street? That's Block D. This is Block A property. You need to pack up and leave, or I'll have to write you up for a violation. That's a $200 fine. I looked at the serene water, then back at her pinched face. The principle of the thing began to itch at me. I'm not leaving, Brenda, and I'm not paying a fine. The lake looks pretty common to me. Her eyes widened. The use of her first name, the calm refusal. It was an act of war. It's Ms. Carmichael to you, and you are in direct violation of HOA rules. This is your only warning. Duly noted, I said, and cast my line back into the water with a soft plop. I could feel her stare burning into the back of my neck. After a full minute of silent, furious standing, I heard her heels pivot on the gravel. You'll regret this, she hissed and marched away. I thought that was the end of it. A little power struggle. Some muttered complaints at the next board meeting. I was naive. 20 minutes later, the peace was shattered by the crunch of tires on gravel and the unmistakable silhouette of a police cruiser. 2 officers got out, looking bemused. And leading them, like a triumphant general, was Brenda. This was the hook, the line, and she was about to get sinkered. My patience, then at the best of times, had just run out. I slowly reeled in my line and stood up, a plan crystallizing in my mind. The game was on, but she didn't know the rules. In fact, she didn't even know who owned the board. The younger officer, Officer Mills, had a barely concealed smile. The older one, Sergeant Dobbs, just looked tired. Brenda, however, was vibrating with righteous victory. "This is him, officers," she announced, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at me. "He's trespassing on private HOA property, refusing to leave after a direct order from the HOA president. I want him cited for trespassing." Sergeant Dobbs sighed, the sigh of a man who had dealt with one too many neighborhood disputes. "Afternoon, sir. You live around here?" "I do. 1428 D Street." "I own it." "He's from Block D." Brenda interjected. "This is Block A lakefront property. The rules are very clear. He has no rights here." "Ma'am, let him speak, please," Officer Mills said, his notepad out. "I was fishing," I said, keeping my voice calm and factual. "The publicly available HOA bylaws state the lake is common property. Ms. Carmichael here cited a new amendment I've never seen, nor was I notified about. I believe I have a right to be here." The amendment was passed. Brenda insisted, pulling a folded sheaf of papers from her fanny pack. "See? Section 4C, amended April 15th. Lake access restricted to premium lot owners in Blocks A and B. It's all legal and recorded with the county." Sergeant Dobbs took the papers, glanced at them, then looked at me. Sir, if this is the rule and you're not from those blocks, it's a civil matter, but you'd technically be trespassing on the HOA's private common area. Easiest thing is to just pack up for today. This was the moment, the pivot. The air was still. I could see the smug satisfaction settling back onto Brenda's face. She'd won. The cops were on her side. I understand, I said, nodding slowly. Then I reached into the inner pocket of my fishing vest. Not for my wallet, but for a different long, sealed envelope I've been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment. But before we determine who can and can't be on this property, there's a fundamental issue of authority here. Brenda snorted. Authority? I'm the HOA president. I have the authority. I ignored her, maintaining eye contact with Sergeant Dobbs. Officer, you said it's the HOA's private common area. That's correct. But who does the HOA answer to? The homeowners, I suppose, he said, curiosity now in his eyes. Exactly. The collective property owners. And for any rule or amendment to be valid, it must be passed by a majority vote of property owners. Correct, Miss Carmichael? It was, she snapped. A unanimous vote of the board. The board, I repeated slowly. Not the full ownership. Interesting. I handed the sealed envelope to Sergeant Dobbs. Officer, for the purposes of clarity in this trespassing investigation, I think you need to see this. It's the relevant section of my property portfolio and the associated title deeds. The page flagged with the green tab is the most pertinent. Brenda stared at the envelope like it was a live snake. What is this? A trick? This is irrelevant. Sergeant Dobbs, his professional demeanor peaked, opened the envelope. He pulled out a thin stack of crisp legal documents. His eyes scanned the top page, then flipped to the green tab page. His eyebrows slowly climbed towards his hairline. He blinked, looked at me, looked back at the paper, then let out a soft, incredulous cough that was almost a laugh. Officer Mills leaned in to look. His eyes widened, and he shot a glance at Brenda, whose confidence was beginning to waver, replaced by a flicker of confusion and dawning alarm. Ma'am, Sergeant Dobbs said, his voice now carrying a new, heavy weight. You stated this land, this lake, is the private common property of the Whispering Pines HOA, representing blocks A and B, correct? Yes, of course it is, Brenda said, but her voice had lost its commanding edge. Dobbs turned the document around and showed it to her. It wasn't the full deed. It was a summary page from my asset manager, listing properties under a holding company name. But at the top, clear as day, was a list. Property holding for Whispering Pines Estates. Phase 1. Lot A, 1 through A, 12 lakefront parcels. Common Area A1, the lake and surrounding parkland. Management rights for Whispering Pines HOA, blocks A and B. Brenda's face went blank, as if her brain had received an error message it couldn't process. What is this? This is some kind of fake. It's not fake, ma'am, Officer Mills said, a grin finally breaking through. It's a notarized summary from Sterling Trust Asset Management. This gentleman, he nodded at me, or rather, his holding company, is the legal owner of all the land you just said he was trespassing on. He owns the lake. He owns the park. He owns, well, the paperwork says he owns all the lots on your block, Miss Carmichael. The color drained from Brenda's face completely, leaving a stark white mask of utter shock. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked from the paper to me, to the serene lake, and back to the paper. The foundation of her entire world, her authority, her prestige, her premium lot, had just crumbled into dust. But my house, she finally whispered, the words barely audible. I finally spoke, my voice quiet but cutting through the silence like a knife. Yes, Brenda. About your house at 1201 Lakeview Drive, Lot A7. You might want to check your mortgage documents. Look for the clause titled Ground Lease. You don't own the land your house sits on. You lease it. From me. Her hands flew to her mouth. The panic the title promised wasn't just in her eyes. It was a physical wave that made her take a stumbling step back. The cops were no longer her allies. They were witnesses to her utter, catastrophic downfall. The ultimate HOA Karen had just tried to have her own landlord arrested for trespassing. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the distant call of a bird and the faint rustle of the document in Sergeant Dobbs's hand. Brenda, or the ghost of Brenda, stood frozen. The furious HOA president was gone, replaced by a woman who looked like she'd been hit by a truck made of legal paperwork. Ground, Lease, she stammered, the phrase foreign and terrifying on her tongue. No, that's not. We own our properties. We have deeds. You have a deed for the improvements, the house itself. I explained, my tone neutral, almost academic. It was the same tone I used in boardrooms. The land beneath it, the very dirt your foundation sits on, has been owned by my family's trust since this development was built 30 years ago. My father was the original developer. He sold the houses but retained the land, leasing it back to homeowners for a nominal lifetime fee. It's all there in your closing documents. Page 87, if I recall correctly. Most people don't read that far. I could see the memory crashing into her. The blur of signing a mountain of papers, the hurried explanations from a title agent, the overwhelming excitement of moving into a premium lakefront home. She'd signed it. They'd all signed it. Sergeant Dobbs carefully handed the documents back to me. Well, he said, clearing his throat, this appears to be a civil property and contract matter, far outside the scope of a trespassing call. There is no trespass here. He gave Brenda a look that was a mixture of pity and reprimand. Ma'am, I'd strongly suggest you review your property documents and consult with your attorney before making any further legal complaints. The humiliation was complete. The officer she'd summoned had just officially sided with me and advised her to get a lawyer. Officer Mills couldn't help himself. So, just to be clear, he said, tapping his notepad with a smile, you called us to report the owner of the entire property for being on his own property? Brenda made a small, choke sound. She couldn't even look at them. I believe my fishing here is within my rights. Officers? I asked politely. I'd say so, sir. Sergeant Dobbs nodded. You have a good day. Ma'am. With a final, professional nod, the two officers returned to their cruiser. The engine started with a rumble that seemed to jolt Brenda back to reality. As the cruiser pulled away, it was just the two of us again by the lake. The power dynamic had not just shifted. It had been inverted and launched into orbit. She turned to me, her initial panic now hardening into a desperate, sputtering anger. This is underhanded, deceptive. I'll call an emergency board meeting. The entire block will revolt. We'll sue. I sat back down on my tackle box, picking up my rod. Brenda, you are the board for blocks A and B. The HOA is a contractual entity I allow to exist for the maintenance of the common areas, which, as you now know, I own. The board administers rules I have the final veto on. You can have all the meetings you want, the votes you want, but any rule, any fine, any amendment, like this one restricting lake access, requires my signature as the landholder to be valid. I never signed that amendment. The last of her fight seemed to drain away, replaced by a cold, sinking dread. Her kingdom was a sandcastle, and the tide was me. Why? She whispered, the question carrying the weight of her shattered identity. Why wouldn't you tell anyone? I cast my line back into the water, watching the ripples expand. My father's philosophy was to be a silent, uninterfering owner. He set the ground lease fee at $1 a year. He never wanted to be a landlord. He just wanted to keep the land in the family, preserve the view. I intended to do the same. I moved into a small house on Block D to keep an eye on things quietly. I didn't want special treatment. I just wanted to be a neighbor. I looked at her, until my neighbor decided to use a tiny bit of power to be a tyrant over a fishing spot. She flinched. You could have just let me fish, Brenda. That's the real kicker. All of this, I gestured around the lake, the mansions, her now precarious existence, was because you couldn't stand the idea of someone from Block D sharing your precious view for one afternoon. The truth of it hung in the air, more damning than any legal clause. She had nothing left to say. She turned on her heel and walked away, her posture no longer that of a patrolling president, but of someone carrying an unbearable weight. The walk of shame had never been more literal. I thought the shock would be the end of it. I was wrong again. The real consequences were just beginning to brew, and they wouldn't just affect Brenda. News in a place like Whispering Pines travels not at the speed of sound, but at the speed of gossip, which is infinitely faster. By the next morning, it wasn't just news, it was legend. The story mutated with each retelling. He owns the whole development. He's a secret billionaire. Brenda tried to have him arrested, and now she's getting evicted. My quiet house on D Street became a pilgrimage site. Nervous neighbors from blocks A and B, still confused about the technicalities of a ground lease, trickled over with bottles of wine, plates of cookies, and poorly disguised anxiety. Their central question was simple. Are we going to lose our homes? I reassured them all, individually. The terms of the ground lease were ironclad and benign. Their ownership of their houses was secure. The $1 a year fee was permanent. Nothing was changing because of what happened. Just ignore any fines or new rules from the HOA board for now. I told them, we'll reset things properly. Brenda, I learned, had locked herself in her lakefront mansion. The for sale sign that appeared on her lawn 3 days later was the talk of the neighborhood. It wasn't just shame, it was a financial reckoning. Trying to sell a house where you don't own the land is a nightmare. The property value was based on the lease, a fact future buyers would now scrutinize intensely. Her premium asset had just become a liability. A week after the lake incident, I called a proper meeting, not an HOA meeting, a landlord's meeting. I rented the local community hall and sent a notice to every homeowner in blocks A and B. The air in the room was thick with tension when I walked in. About 50 people were there, Brenda conspicuously absent. I stood at the front. No podium, just me. I know you've all heard a lot of stories. I began. Let me give you the facts. I explained my father's original plan, the structure of the ground lease, and my intention to remain a silent partner. That changed last week. I admitted because the system that was meant to manage your common areas was being used to create division and bully residents. That ends now. I laid out my plan. The existing HOA for blocks A and B was dissolved. In its place, I would establish a new residence council. It would have real authority over communal budgets for lake maintenance, landscaping, and security. But the council would include proportional representation from all blocks in Whispering Pines, including C and D. The lake was open to everyone. The premium block concept was officially dead, killed by its own gatekeeper. You'll all receive an amended land lease agreement. I continued. The terms are the same, $1 a year lifetime tenure. The only change is an addendum that legally grants the new residence council its management powers, so you have control and clarity. I will sign over the deed for the lake and parkland to the council, to be held in trust for all residents. There was a stunned silence, then a slow building wave of applause. The fear in the room melted into relief, then into something like gratitude. The monster they feared, the all-powerful secret landlord, was handing them the keys and leveling the playing field. The people from Block C and D, who'd come out of curiosity, looked stunned and then delighted. As for Brenda, her house sold 6 months later for roughly 60% of its perceived value. The buyers were a young family who didn't care about block prestige, just a lake view. I made sure the new residents' council welcomed them warmly. I still live in my modest house on D Street. I still go fishing in the lake. Now, I'm often joined by neighbors from all blocks. We talk about kids, work, the weather. Sometimes someone new will hear the story and ask, "Wait, so you're the guy who owns all this?" I just shrug and cast my line. Nah, I say, I just own the dirt. The neighborhood owns itself. And as for Karens, Whispering Pines has been curiously free of them ever since. It's amazing what happens when you replace a structure of petty power with one of shared ownership. The lake has never been more peaceful, and the fishing, I must say, has never been better.